Holy God, we thank you for your continued watch care over us as each of us individually and corporately go through our lives, and we each enter into the experience of what's happening all around us. Please help us to have wisdom, knowledge, and discernment to be able to navigate a path that is safe and redemptive. Bless us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. So I had a question about, I've spoken in the past with respect to working in the system, that's the legal system or the cultural system or the social system of any particular country, I guess the world in general, as opposed to working outside of that. So it's not a controversial question. So that was from Andreas, if you don't mind me saying that. So I'm not exactly sure what the question is relating to, Andreas, if you could maybe expand a little bit more.
So I guess it wasn't necessarily a question in the sense that for me it's a subject that um, it seems very important, but like I can't fully grasp. Um, so it was more about if you could elaborate on that concept as a concept and as how it relates to the great test.
So, so as we know, we came to be radical feminists, and I guess I've asked the question several times what a radical feminist is, how we define that. So I don't know if anybody is willing to give their understanding or their view of what we mean in this movement, not in the world, in the movement, when we say we're radical feminists. Let's begin there. Go ahead, Curtis.
What I've come to understand it to mean is that it's a principle that is going to be used to guide the development of something. So as opposed to it being actions that you do in the world, it's a principle that shapes the framework of an organization or an institution or etc. And yeah.
Shapes the thinking of an organization.
Yeah.
If you just repeat that, Curtis, it's the idea of a movement.
It's the principle that something is going to be built upon. It's theoretical, if I can put it that way.
So are you saying that this movement is different to other people who claim to be radical feminists, that they have more than a theory?
In how they're going to define radical feminism is that they're going to take it as actions that you do against the system, whereas instead of radical feminism as being practical, it's theoretical in our definition.
Anyone else?
So, um, what I understood from the previous presentations is that um, it's about going to the root of the problems instead of being extremists about the topic, let's say. Because in the past, or other people might understand radical feminism as being extreme about it.
So if I could ask you, Curtis, when you said that it's an idea or a principle or a theory that we speak about as opposed to a practice, is that how you explained it?
Yeah, and that your practices are going to be born out of that principle. So
Tell
yeah.
me, give me an example of what a radical feminist would do when they put their theory into practice, whether we do that or whether we don't.
Their practice is going to be what we would describe as a liberal feminist. So going to action, going to work. And I guess the parable that's been used to explain that is the mustard seed. That this mustard seed is going to have a principle within it that's going to shape how the organization is going to be built. So for us in the movement, how we organize the movement is going to be grounded on certain principles.
Got that. My question was, go to a radical feminist outside of this movement. How did they put their theory into practice? What does it look like?
Within this patriarchal system that we live in here on Earth, or in an ideal world?
The question was about working within the system or outside the system. That's what Andretti's question is. So it's in the world in which we live, whether it's our country or continent or the world in general. How do you take this theory and put it into practice? The theory of radical feminism, and translate it into the practice of radical feminism.
I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay. So is that because you can't think of examples where you outside of a system that would be productive of anything useful?
It's because the examples that come to mind, I don't want to trip myself up down the road. So if I can say a radical feminist, for instance, is going to recognize the root sexist causes of different things in life, and the one that we go to most of the time is with regards to dress, how men and women dress.
Did you say identify? Is that the word you used?
Yeah,
Identify what?
the patriarchal roots to different things in life.
I'm just going to say roots.
Yeah. And then from that, you shape your life around doing things that don't reflect those patriarchal roots. So the easy example that we all turn to is with regards to dress. And we see the way in which society shapes our dress is grounded in patriarchal concepts.
And what would a radical feminist do about that?
For themselves, they wouldn't follow those norms.
So if they do follow the norms, does that mean that by definition they're not a radical feminist?
That's why I said I don't have a good answer
No.
because I'm just gonna trip myself up.
So you had
Yeah,
a point, Emma?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer it.
I don't have to answer that one. No, I was thinking they think marriage is a product of patriarchy, so they won't get married.
So radical feminists won't get married. Is that what you're saying?
They all are. That's one thing that some are.
So a radical feminist would say, I will, because of my principles, I will forfeit all the tax advantages that society offers me.
Yeah.
And do radical
Can't hear
feminists
Emma.
actually, you can't hear Emma.
No.
So would a radical feminist believe in monogamous relationships?
I'm not sure. I suppose not necessarily if you follow the logic.
So if you follow the logic, then no. And if you went to Islamic model or a Mormon model, they don't believe in monogamy either, and they're not radical feminists. So why would radical feminism? Why would a marker of radical feminism be a rejection of monogamous relationships when patriarchal models do exactly the same thing? So Emma says she doesn't know because they look the same. You have two contradictory, opposing social models. One is, we'll say, good and one is bad, and they end up in the same place, having not having two people who are committed to each other, forsaking all others, as we say in typical marriage vows. So it can't be a marker of radical feminism if what they're trying to fight against, which is patriarchy, offers exactly the same thing. And in fact, the reason why we don't practice that today in most of the world is because it's been restricted. Because even if you go back into Christian biblical ideas, stories, they don't have monogamy either. They have multiple wives. And it all seems okay. We've stopped doing that today because everybody seems to agree, whether you're a patriarch or not, most people, not everybody, it's not a good idea. I don't know if anybody's got a comment on that, because it comes up often, this idea that a radical feminist don't believe in marriage because they see it as a social construct. And the definition of marriage, when you said I don't agree with marriage, Emma, what was your definition of marriage?
The definition was between a male and a female. So I don't know whether that means they would agree with lesbian marriage, because it seems to be rooted in hating men having control over women. So I'm not sure about the monogamous question, because I don't know whether that just means they would practice monogamy with a lesbian partner, but they wouldn't with a male partner. I don't know enough about it, to be honest.
Anybody got a view or a thought? Nobody? Either nobody cares or nobody knows.
About monogamy or in general, the discussion?
Well, just on this example, I'm trying to understand how you take the theory and put it into practice. And I looked for some examples and can't remember the example that you gave, Curtis. Oh, clothing. You gave an example of clothing, and you see that you quickly trip up on that. because as soon as you do that, you get to the same place that we in the movement got to.
Yeah.
And you quickly backed out of that. And then Emma saying it's about marriage, the rejection of marriage. And my question was, does that mean they don't like all the tax breaks that people who are married have, or they don't believe in monogamy? Because a lot of patriarchal societies don't believe in monogamy either. And however we define the world or governments, there's now a social construct that most governments have that force you to have monogamous relationships, legal ones. But patriarchy is really happy for a man to have multiple wives. And if we're saying radical feminists don't agree with marriage, I presume they want some kind of relationship. Then it would be, depending on what term anybody would use, it'd be perhaps an open relationship. But it's still not monogamous. It seems to me that doesn't become a marker either for radical feminism.
So, if I can use Paul as an example, Paul is going to say, I believe in these principles of the kingdom, of the gospel. And then Paul is going to give pragmatic advice to the people that he's living with because of the circumstances that they're in. But he's going to try and apply that principle pragmatically. So for us with radical feminism, would it be the same thing that you take a principle and you look at your surroundings and the context that you're in, and you look how to apply that principle pragmatically? So the pragmatic thing would be with clothing, that men don't wear dresses, given this underlying principle that you have, and you look at what's around you, the circumstances in the world that you're in. Don't look like a crazy person. Would it be the same thing?
Sure, but you've gone from men's clothing to crazy clothing.
Sorry, explain that.
You said something, men's clothing, and then you said something, crazy clothing. So
When I say, I'm not saying literally crazy clothing. I mean, from the world's eyes, they're going to look at a man wearing a dress as someone crazy.
Oh, so you're saying if you dress as a cross gender, that looks bad to society. That's what
Yeah.
you define. And so what should a radical feminist do? Buck the system or agree with the system?
Agree with the system.
So if you agree with the system and the issue is voting, when do you get to a place where you say, I don't agree with the system, I'm going to buck it? Buck it means oppose it.
Yeah.
Because all you've just done now is saying, I'm just going to choose my battles carefully. But that won't define what radical feminism is. Just say, I choose this battle, but not that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll go on mute now.
Wait, what was that?
I'll go on mute.
I'm not sure I got that part of voting.
Okay, so I explained that. So Curtis said it's wrong to have gender-based clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Women dresses, men trousers. But because that's what culture does, and if a man wore a dress, people would say that's really weird. So a radical feminist man wouldn't wear women's clothing. They would just obey the system.
Mm-hmm.
That was his argument. And it's based upon looking strange. And I said, well, what would happen if the issue wasn't trousers or dresses, but it was voting? And my point in doing that was to compare and contrast, if you like. It was to show that what we've just done then, when we talk about dress or voting is just choosing which fight we're prepared to engage into. It doesn't help us with the principle or idea of what would define a radical feminist.
But when you said voting, you mean like the decision to vote or not to vote, or to vote for some candidate as
The
opposed to
world
another?
says women can't vote.
Ah,
So
okay,
the
okay,
women
okay.
say it's wrong, but it's really weird for women to vote, so we won't do it.
Okay,
Or
okay.
the women say we don't care if it's weird, we will do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so if we say, well, it's obviously correct on that issue, then why isn't it good that men wear dresses and say we don't care if it looks weird, we'll do it anyway?
Got it. Yeah.
I do want to point, I hope we all know, we talk about dress because dress is up here, that this movement's position on dress, even in the world, if we say feminist or radical feminist position on dress, is that women want to wear men's clothes, but there aren't men who want to wear women's clothes, generally speaking. It's a very gendered issue, even with clothing, when we talk about people can wear what they want. I know we haven't discussed that in the movement in any particular depth, but I assume we all recognize that in our movement, not literally all, but most of the women here wear trousers now, but I don't see any men wearing dresses or skirts. And we all seem to be okay with our now radical feminist, non-gendered clothing standards. Does everybody see that?
When you say we're okay with it, do you mean that we're okay with women wanting to wear, in inverted commas, men's clothing, but men not wanting? Like, what are you saying we're okay with?
We seem okay with men not wearing women's clothes. It's something that we just ignore. So it's like all radical feminists that I've heard about, they all seem to ignore that as well.
Yeah, or
Men
like
haven't shifted. Men don't shift their position. It's women who have shifted.
yeah, with makeup, for example, as well. It's not like we are okay with saying, or I don't know if we're okay, but like let's say let's say, I mean, we don't see men wearing makeup. We tend to disagree with, like women wearing makeup, if we do disagree with that.
Oh, we do, or if we do?
If we do.
Do you?
Do I disagree with women wearing makeup?
Yeah.
I don't think I mean, I see that that it might be problematic, like the roots of it, but I don't think I would be I would disagree with. I wouldn't say like don't wear it.
You're
I
wasted
think.
in software engineering. You should be a politician. Very well said there.
But isn't it ground at least for God's people, the movement, isn't it grounded in Ellen White's advice that if you want the gospel to go forward, then don't be strange?
So Natalie said the definition strange is a stretchy term. But in principle, yes, she does say that. Is that why you don't wear a dress?
I'm gonna say yes to save my face, but the real answer, for other men, I'm joking, is because we are uncomfortable with the idea of demasculating ourselves.
Okay. And women are okay with masculating themselves?
With
I doubt
fighting
you'd say
for
that.
I never say you said that. I never said that.
Yeah, no, I said that I doubt if you would say that.
Yeah.
I just did a compare and contrast.
Well, there's a contrast there. It's not a compare.
Okay. So I don't know if it's going to answer Andres' questions, because I'm still trying to probe in what's behind his question. But my whole premise, when I've spoken about this in the past, is that working out of this outside the system isn't productive of any good. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't work. And when we speak about clothes there, when I spoke about what a radical feminist as an individual, then they get together and they become a group, which is the definition of what is that, the definition? When the individual, 5 individuals doing their own thing, get together, and then they have a group think. What do we call that?
Political.
Yeah, so is everybody okay with that? That's the working definition of personalist political. When you go back to the history where this term was coined, that's how it worked out. There might be a bit, I might be a bit mushy on the history of that, but a group of women who were all having a hard time in life, thinking this is just me having a hard time, get together, and when they hear one another's stories, they say, oh, we've all got a common experience, which means that the system is against us collectively, and the us would be women. Is that a reasonable definition of the personalist political?
Yeah.
Yeah, makes
Magda,
sense to myself.
agree with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Blessing? Emma, anyone? Yeah, okay, so most people here are that definition about the creation of the personalist political. So when I spoke about that subject, I spoke about social reform or social change. And to me, if you were starting this thing up from the ground up, would you want to prioritize things?
Yes.
So if we were going to prioritize things, what would be Curtis has spoken about clothes in 2 circumstances. Emma spoke about marriage, and I'll speak about voting. We're going to prioritize things. We've got 3. What order would we put them in? What order would you put them in? Priority of
Voting.
importance.
I think the voting would be the most important.
Okay, so several of the people have said this would be the first.
The legalities of marriage, the second.
Second and third. Why does clothing get relegated to the bottom for you, whoever the you is, any of us? Why are you relegating clothing to the end?
I want to speak, but I don't want to just be the only one that's speaking. So
I don't want you to either. I agree
Yeah.
with you. Magda, are you there with us? Because I can't tell if people are here or they're just eating their breakfast or doing something else or washing their clothes.
I'm here.
Okay, Magda, do you agree with that order? I'm not saying you were doing anything wrong, by the
Yes.
way. I was first, second, and third. Yes.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Why is clothing the least important thing to deal with?
Because it's just kind of like things where voting it's about rights and marriage is about kind of I don't know.
Voting is rights, you said, and what was clothing?
And it's I don't know. I just would put it as less important. It's kind of like just I don't know. A
Is
thing.
it, what's that?
I think it's like relationships and rights of the people. No, I know it's no, sorry, forget it. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, anyone else?
Sorry, I just left the room for about 2 minutes. What does it say on the top? I can't read it.
I don't know what top is. This top
Yes, that one.
that says clothes, marriage, voting. People have said voting is the most important, marriage is the second important, and clothing is the least. My question was, why is clothing relegated to the bottom? Just so just say Sidney first, and then Natalie cannot say it in a moment. Were you going to answer, Sidney, or were you just asking the question?
I was just asking the question, but it's something for me to think about. I don't know why people said clothing is right
Well,
down.
don't worry about them.
Oh.
Ask yourself, if you had 3 things to do with, which would be your priority out of those 3?
Voting,
And what would be the second most important?
marriage, and then clothing. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you said you don't know why other people did it, but you've done the same.
Yeah.
Okay. So you do know why they did it, because you have the same, even if you can't define it, you have the same thoughts.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So Natalie said, what did you say, Natalie? Got to speak a little bit loud.
We see it today that clothing is very important, that a woman wears dress. So yeah,
So
it's difficult for me to see it as not that important.
I don't want to say it's not that important, but if we're going to prioritize things, I'm saying what would be the most important thing for you? And do you agree, Natalie, that clothing would be the least important out of those 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Emma? Can everybody hear Emma?
No.
No.
I have to come closer because I don't know, the microphone here isn't working that well.
I think it's because the other 2 are institutions. I don't know if you could say voting's an institution, but it relates to the whole system, and it can change on a big level. Societal changes can be made at that level, as opposed to clothing, which doesn't seem to have the power that the other 2 have to affect people. To change the system, I suppose. That's the logic.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody, hopefully the reason you couldn't hear Emma and Natalie well is because I have to use 2 different microphones. That was my mistake. It's a technical thing, sorry. So Emma is saying, I think, the reason why clothing is, let's go with voting. Why is voting so important? Can a radical feminist say, you know what, it's Tuesday and I made a mistake and I've got an appointment to get my hair done, and I know it's election day, but you know what, hair is really important, so I'm going to not vote today and go and get my hair done. Or I promised to meet my friend at a cafe for lunch and I know it's voting day, so I skipped that. Would they do that? Would a radical feminist do that? And I'm not trying to say the radical feminist is a woman with the hair or the lunch or anything. So Natalie said no. Anybody disagree with that? Okay, so I'm going to say you all agree. So Charity said no. That means, I think Charity means that voting, you'd cancel all your appointments and you would vote because it's that important. Okay, so if we go with marriage and we forget the issue of monogamy, and we say, if you get married, the government will give you a 20% tax break on your income. So you get lots of money if you marry. And the system says only certain people can get married, whoever the certain people are. What would a radical feminist do, or how would they respond to that position? If you're married, you're going to get all these tax breaks, which means you get lots of extra money, but only certain people are allowed to do that. What would a radical feminist say? Natalie, 1 second. Go ahead.
Keep it, not marrying.
So Natalie would say, keep it, not marrying. So you have a white couple and a black couple, men and women, either one, both of them. If I use the term heterosexual, and the government says only white people are allowed to marry, not black people. So the white woman will now get will get more money than the black woman. They're in the same job, both of them, but the white woman will get much more money because she can get married, and married people have a tax break. And Natalie, now what's your position? So Natalie says it's the same. Does everybody agree with her, or does someone disagree with Natalie's position?
To clarify, is her position that in rebellion of the system, you just choose not to get married?
Yes. Yeah, Natalie says, just if that's what the system is, you just don't marry.
You don't get 20% tax break.
Because you're a black woman, you don't get the 20% tax rate because you're a black woman.
No, you don't marry either.
Sure.
What's Emma saying?
I'm saying you don't get it if you don't marry either. I'm not sure what radical feminist.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost the example a bit. So the white couple, and what's the difference between them again?
One's white, one's black. There's a law in that country that says black people aren't allowed to marry.
Okay.
And I'm asking, what would a radical feminist view be on that? And Natalie's was, because marriage is a patriarchal system and racism tucks right into patriarchal systems. They're twins. She's saying, I want to say, said something about a word. Forget the whole system. Suck it up, black people. This black woman, don't marry.
And the white couple would marry? Is that what she's saying? Or wouldn't?
She didn't say it. The issue is not about the people, the white people who do. It's the system says you're not allowed to marry. The white woman's rubbing her hands together. She's just got a 20% pay rise compared to her colleague.
But how could the black couple marry if they are not allowed to marry? Like an alternative marriage?
No, the only way you're going to do it is by voting and changing the system.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm asking what a radical feminist would do, how they would approach this issue.
I guess they'd approach it in this hierarchical way. The thing that's going to impact the thing below it, and in that modeling, it's voting that's going to impact marriage. So you would go to the first problem, which is voting.
Okay, so I'll give you my suggestion of what I think a radical feminist would do. They would say the issue of marriage is important and it's serious, and they would encourage the black couple to marry, and they would push the government to change the laws so that everybody can marry. Or they would encourage the government to nullify the tax breaks that married people get. Either one of the two. But a radical feminist who believes in equality would want to create a system that everybody is equal under the law. So you'd have to go with one or the other. I'm suggesting not to say, well, just ignore marriage because it's a patriarchal construct.
And so when you write voting, you're putting seek equality under the law, not just literal voting, but everything to do with changing the system and finding equality under the law. Did I understand that correctly?
We didn't discuss everything that voting entails, but voting is a synonym of being able to have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the issue is, it just means having a voice. Should everybody have a voice? Is that what a radical feminist would believe? That you should have a voice? So we're all saying yes on that. And then when it comes to marriage, I can't remember how. I think we were talking about how important marriage is. So I gave an example, and I think there are a fair few people, either in the movement or in the world, who have this idea that marriage is a patriarchal construct. But it's not just a patriarchal construct in the sense of just men and women. It's also a racist construct. There were plenty of countries in the world just very recently that it was illegal for people of color to marry. And if a radical feminist takes the position that don't worry about marriage because it's a patriarchal construct, you end up advocating for inequality.
I think there's tax.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Aren't those tax breaks coming only if you have children? I know that's not what you're talking about.
Some are connected to children, some are not connected to children.
France wants that if you have children, you're going to get tax breaks in the future, isn't it? It's all about family, for our kids, not just about marriage.
So I don't know if people have a problems on mean testing what you get or what you can have by the means. And if you had 20 children, your expenses are more than if you had no children.
Get more tax breaks though, do in Russia and all the other places. So you will in America.
Who thinks it's wrong if you have 20 children that you should get more money, more benefits, more help than if you had no children?
I don't think it's wrong, but they're saying this marriage is about, it's not about those cat ladies who want to get married. It's about the cat ladies who get married and then have children. If you have children, we'll look after you. We will protect women. About making baby litters.
Curtis, go ahead. I don't know.
Is the what's trying to be conveyed the idea that the goal is to just get equality under the law, i.e. equality of opportunity, whether everyone gets different outcomes, i.e. one family will get tax breaks because they get married and someone who's single won't, isn't the issue. It's that now you have the opportunity to get those tax breaks that you didn't have before. Is that what the fight is for?
When it comes to the scenario that I set up, to me, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't believe in marriage, if you think, oh, it's a horrible thing, should we not fight for people to have equal access?
You said in that scenario. Why did you specifically say in that scenario?
I gave a specific example. I'm not trying to advocate that marriage is the epitome that everybody should head towards.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I meant.
Okay. But is that principle applicable in all examples that you can think of? As in, is that the principle? I guess that's what I'm trying to.
I'd have to come up with 2 or 3 examples to know that it's a principle. So I'm reticent to say it's a principle, but my feeling is that it probably is. But I'd want to have a couple of examples just to be sure.
Okay. It's come up. So a year ago, 2 years ago, Germany removed a law that said that women couldn't be topless on the beach, and there were discussions about whether that's radical feminist or not. And a perspective is that it is, not because we want women or men to be running around topless, but just in the eyes of the law, there's equal opportunity. Whether a woman decides to be topless or not on the beaches is up to them. But the key issue is that now legally they're treated as equals. Is that another situation where you have the same dynamic?
For me, yes.
Okay.
And that I think often we get tied up with clothing, and if we're not careful, we tie ourselves up in knots when we do that. When we make these when we make these statements about clothing, where we say, you know, these are women's clothes and these are men's clothes, and we should have, because there's no such thing as gender neutral clothes, not in the world in which we live. It's all very gendered. And if we were to go down that road, and sometimes do, what we end up saying is you can't by definition be a radical feminist unless you adhere to a dress code.
And you end up
yet,
just going back into the same pit that you're running away from.
If you believe that what you just came out of was a pit.
Oh.
Because all of us have, plenty of people in the movement, if not all of us, have said we came out of a pit. You just said we came out of a pit, so you believe we did come out of a pit. And if you're not careful, you're going to just jump straight into the other side of the road. Let's not call it a pit. Let's call it a ditch. You came out of one ditch on one side of the road. Now you're just about to enter into another one. Because what happens is, if you start defining clothes in this kind of rigid way, that means women can't dress in a certain way. And if they want to, you end up falling into that ditch, and then you have the same restrictions.
Yeah, that's what I wasn't saying that it literally was a pit, not literally, but making the point that as soon as you say something is right, then you're going to go back to saying something is wrong, which is what we were running away from.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you asked about voting. Let me ask another question about voting. Is voting voluntary? Without talking about a specific example. Can we say, I don't want to vote? My choice, my body, my choice. Are we allowed to do that?
Yes.
Natalie says, no, ask him what you think, not what I think. Cedri says, yes, we can. If we don't want to vote, we don't have to. Anyone else? Blessing, I don't know if you want to speak. Ignatius? Richard?
Are you asking in principle, Parminder, or you're saying how laws work in
principle?
In principle, I don't think.
Do we have a choice to vote?
I don't think we have a choice in principle. I think we have to.
Okay. So Cedri says, yes, we have a choice. And Blessing said, we don't have a choice.
No, I didn't realize it was in principle. But legally, we can refuse to vote.
Only in our country. In other countries, they don't. But so it's not about that, the legality of it. Each country decides on their own way of doing things. Sorry?
Is it me you're talking to?
Yes.
No, I thought that's what you meant. I thought maybe you were saying that is it legal or not?
Okay, no, I'm not saying that because I don't want to make it country specific.
But on principle, you should.
You don't have a choice. We,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it's Ignatius.
yes, Ignatius.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with Blessing. We are supposed to vote. We are supposed to get involved in policy crafting of our our nation. We are supposed, in principle, we are supposed to vote.
Okay, so we don't have a choice. Natalie, you want to say something?
Where's the autonomy?
So let's not ask a rhetorical question. Just give me your position.
I was thinking that, now I thought about it, that there's no freedom if we're forced to vote. Where is the freedom and the autonomy if this movement says you've got to vote? Even though we are meant to be,
I'm not asking what the movement said.
me,
I'm asking,
me.
so you have what you think as a radical feminist, you have a choice whether you vote or not.
Well, if you want to prove you're a radical feminist, you should vote, I suppose. But then again, we've been talking lately about freedom or autonomy
What you just said is, if I'm a radical feminist, I have to vote. That's what you just said.
before the first time.
Just now. You just said that. So my question is, do you have to vote?
I find it hard because if we're forced to vote, then it's not freedom.
I'm not saying someone is forcing you. That's not my question. My question is, if you say, this is what I am, I'm a human who has 2 legs, not 4 legs. And therefore, I walk on 2 legs.
Yes, yes. If you're a radical feminist, you're forced in what you're saying you are to vote.
Okay, so we all agree that you have to vote. So go back to clothes. If you're a radical feminist, do you have to wear a certain dress code? Do you have to dress in a certain way if you're a radical feminist?
Yes.
No.
So Natalie said
No.
yes. So that means Natalie said, as an example, everyone should be wearing skirts. So if you're a man and you're not wearing a skirt, you're not a radical feminist.
I thought we were talking about women, radical feminists.
So Natalie says, only women are radical feminists. She's dangerous. Okay, so we're saying now that every single radical feminist, they can only wear trousers now. No skirts, no dress.
I think we should be feminist. Don't go into that. That's just my wild thought.
Are you saying we all have to wear trousers now, Natalie?
Absolutely not.
My question, what was my question? You have to dress in a certain way, and now you're saying absolutely not. A minute ago you said absolutely yes.
With voting.
Clothing.
With clothing, you're saying that radical feminist has to.
No, I'm asking, you said they have to dress in a certain way.
Yeah. I didn't say that they have to.
You did.
Did I? You sure you didn't say that? And you asked me, do I think that?
You said yes. You said, do you have to dress in a certain way? You said yes.
If you're
And then he said, so as an example, do we all have to wear trousers? And he said, no.
Okay. I would say no, you don't. But a true radical feminist in the world would say, oh yes, you do. You know, you have to wear trousers.
So all radical feminists in the world, they have to wear trousers.
I think. Yeah. It's a bit like the marriage question before, isn't it? No. I don't think all radical feminists probably say that, do they? If I'll be honest with them.
Okay, so I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment, but that's why clothing is number 3. That's why it's not as important. That's why we relegate it. We could add another 3 or 4 things in it. The more you do, you end up having clothing going lower and lower and end up being 10th.
Elder Parminder.
Yes.
I want to say something. My understanding of equality now, at least, is that it's equality as defined by the law. So we are equal under the law, not necessarily equal in capabilities or equal in appearance, etc. But that the law treats us equally. And voting seems to be directly related to the legality of things, the law, whereas clothes are a matter of personal preference on the most part. So I would think it should be problematic to start giving certain definitions of how people should dress. So in order for you to be considered a radical feminist, you have to wear trousers as a woman, for example. You have to do it. I think it becomes problematic because it's I think very far away from the definition of equality, which is being equal under the law, the legal system.
So all that you've said is a brief summary of the steps or the direction that the movement has taken over the last several years. Unless anybody would disagree with that. And so my question back to you, Blessing, is if that's correct, what you've said, the way you've defined the difference between voting and clothing, what do we do with the idea that clothing is as much a patriarchal issue as voting is? So voting says, not voting says the issue around voting is only men can vote. And the clothing issue is only men can wear trousers. Or do it the other way, voting, men and women have to behave in very different ways. Clothing, men and women have to behave in very different ways. So they have, do you agree that they have the same properties to them?
Yes.
So they have the same properties, but you're approaching them differently. And so the question that I think people struggle with, and they've struggled with it in this discussion, is if they're both the same issue, why do we only focus on one of them and ignore the other one? We ignore clothing, saying, do what you want. And I think you use the word individual. It's very individual, but you say voting is an individual that has a certain property to it that makes it non-individual. So I want you to comment, or anybody, why does clothing not receive the same scrutiny or the same rigor as voting? Why does individuality trump corporate responsibility or corporate acknowledgement that the way we dress is sinful? Sinful being gendered. That's the sin. It's gendered, not the morality of topless or if it's discreet or whatever. The sin is the clothing is gendered. And why do we say you can do what you want? But with voting, we say you can't do what you want where they're identical issues. Do you want to have a go with that?
I think, like I said earlier, that voting has a direct impact on the law, on the legality of things. So how we achieve equal treatment for men and women is by having the law codify that men and women should be treated in the same way. And I think if we prioritize that, it has a trickle-down effect to the subject of clothing. Not to say that it starts defining what men and women should wear, but how men and women should be treated when it comes to clothing. Because under the current setup, I'd say, men and women are treated differently when it comes to their appearance. So there's a lot of scrutiny, for example, on women's appearance, whereas there isn't as much scrutiny with men. And I think the approach would be to achieve equal treatment in terms of how men and women appear. If you don't micromanage how men dress, then you shouldn't micromanage how women dress. And because of that, it ends up being a situation where it seems like it ends up being a situation where people choose what they want to wear, basically. So that's how I understand it.
even though it's a patriarchal phenomena.
Even though it's a patriarchal phenomenon.
So if I were to say, not everything that you said, but if I were to express it this way, that when it comes to voting, we will force people, whoever the we is, society, the government, we will force people to behave in a certain way. And that would mean we would allow everybody the right to vote, whether the other people like it or not. They're forced to accept it. But we won't codify or force people to dress in a certain way, even though the issues are very similar and they can be problematic in their own, in the same way.
I think it was a bit too long for me. Sorry, could you?
Okay, so I'll just summarize that. Voting, we have to have a system where, whether you like it or not, which means that there is force involved, everybody is allowed to vote. But when it comes to clothing, we won't force people to dress in a certain way. Everybody has their own choice, even though the issues around clothing and voting are very similar.
Yes, but I'd also say I think there is an element of, I don't know if I can say force. I'll use force because you used the word force, in terms of how you treat people on the choices they make for clothing. So everyone is forced to not scrutinize or micromanage someone else's clothing choices.
Why can we pressure people to vote in a certain way, but we can't pressurize people to dress in a certain way?
Because I think our priority is getting people equal treatment under the law.
Does anybody want to comment on that?
Elder Parminder, I
Mhm.
I think these two issues are slightly different, the voting issue and the clothing issue. So if we say we, I assume we are talking about us perhaps as an institution or a movement. We could
When I
say
said we, I meant a society.
a society. Okay, let me take it to be a society. If I say we as a society, we would say that everyone should give an opinion regarding how we want our society to be shaped. And I would put the word force in quotes to say, so everyone is supposed.
You've cut out Ignatius, so I think you're saying everybody is supposed to vote.
He's dropped.
Yeah, okay. Oh, he's actually dropped.
Oh.
He's still in, but his audio's dropped. So does anybody else want to comment? Andreas?
So what I'm thinking now with this example, oh, I was muted.
Sorry, accidentally.
Okay. So what I'm thinking now is that it seems reasonable to me that if we are going to pressurize people to vote because we need to fight against patriarchy, let's say it that way simply, it seems reasonable that we would have to pressurize people to dress a certain way, at least to a degree. Like not be overcome by patriarchy in the way you dress.
Do you disagree with Blessing?
Yeah.
And tell me the principle that you're trying to identify where you would say, in essence, you're saying they have to be treated the same way.
Yeah, both examples.
Yes.
Voting and dressing.
So when it comes to voting, what's the standard?
The standard is fight
Is
against patriarchy.
everybody is supposed to vote.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that a
Mhm.
gendered phenomena?
Yes.
No, but everybody
It-
can do it. Isn't it gender neutral?
Okay. In that sense, yes, it's gender neutral.
Clothing, if you're going to say that also should be addressed in the same way, what would be the standard for the clothes?
That we should all dress in a gender neutral way.
And what would be the gender neutral way of dressing? What would be a gender neutral code? Because it can't be dresses and it can't be trousers.
Like
They're
a
supposed
cape. Yeah, we would have to like come up with something, but we would be forced to actually come up with something.
Yeah, and you'd end up being the problem with that is that if you I'm not an expert on the subject, but if you trace the subject of clothing, I know it goes through history in various ways, but generally wearing I'm just going to say a shirt and trousers, which is today a very gendered way of dressing, is actually a very practical way of dressing. And women's dress today actually isn't very practical. And so people didn't invent men's clothes to say, let's make this type of clothing because it's so masculine. They did it because men were working back in the day, and they tried to create clothing that was very practical for people who work. Because women didn't work, they didn't need practical clothing. So the problem that you'll find is if you go to the issue of non-gendered clothing, that you'll end up quickly gravitating just on health and safety issues to what we already have today, which is basically a shirt and trousers.
Okay, but that kind of solves the problem, doesn't it? Like,
And all the radical feminists say, yeah, you just tricked us. Now we just have to wear men's clothes. And the men say,
yeah,
isn't this happy days? We don't have to change.
yeah, tough luck.
So even though they have very similar properties, voting and clothing has this element to it, which I don't think we in the movement have really been able to pinpoint properly. We all have this idea that it's different, but we all acknowledge intellectually that it's the same.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
The way you explained it is, well, the logic is the same. The logic for voting, the logic for clothing is all the same argument, same logic. Therefore, we just go to a very logical position and treat them identically. And the problem is when you do that with clothing, you're going to end up making everybody wear men's clothes.
Yeah.
So some people say we already are, but now we're saying you're required to. So every time we see women in our movement who don't wear men's clothes, we're saying you're not a true radical feminist.
I think that's kind of like the problem with oppression. Like it works. Like for example, if you were a slave back in the days versus if you were an owner, I'm gonna put it simply, like we would say this: you're required not to be a slave, and the owner is required not to have slaves. And because the slaves were oppressed and everything, it might have been really hard for them. Like it's always the oppressed people that have to work harder. So it kind of like seems to me that it's the same unfortunate situation, but it's what ends up happening when you have to get rid of inequality. I don't know if that makes sense.
So who's the slave owner and who's the slave in your example?
The slave would be the woman, and the slave owner would be the.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I can't help you get out of that one. I'm afraid you're on your brain.
Yeah, Andres,
What
we need
is
to
it?
have a chat.
What was that, Curtis?
No, I was just teasing Andres. I have a question, but I
Oh,
guess I
before you do that, Charity said, with clothing, the issue that needs to be dealt with is giving the women the right to choose what they have to wear or what they want to wear, treating them as human beings that are able to make decisions for themselves, even if it makes someone else uncomfortable. So I agree with what you said, Charity, but I just want to add one more thing is, with clothing, the issue is, or the issue that needs to be dealt with, is that we all dislike patriarchy. I assume we all dislike it. And yet we're prepared to support a patriarchal or gendered way of dressing. And I think that's what the struggle is that people have. How we say that patriarchy is wrong or gendered issues are wrong, and yet we're saying everybody can dress in a very gendered way because everybody's free to dress how they want to. And then on the other side, if you were to use logic or argument, you'd say, well, why do we want to perpetuate patriarchy? Let's treat it in a very logical fashion, which means women should not be dressing in a gendered way, which means in a way that was forced upon them by societies of old. And if you go down that path, you end up getting problems, I think.
Didn't we set that up in the movement? Is that why we're here?
So Charity just said the same thing that I said. When we do that, we end up controlling women. Yes. Curtis.
isn't this thing with clothing, can't it just be transposed on any other thing? So gendered jobs, gendered careers, or gendered courses of study and etc. So for instance, what you pointed out was that trousers and shirts came about because of practical means. And so the people who were enslaved women are now going to want the liberty to pursue those jobs, and so they need the practical clothing. It's not the other way around where the person who was at liberty is now seeking oppression, in what Andres was talking about, the enslaved owner and the enslaved. It's always one direction where the enslaved is wanting the liberty that the oppressor did have. So if you go to career choices, it's women wanting to go into STEM fields because there's more freedom, there's more liberty there. It's not arguments around men wanting to become cooks at home and etc. It's because the freedom exists on one specific side of the scale, and that's why it's unidirectional.
So if I understand what you're saying there, that whilst it appears to be a gendered issue, clothing, the reality is that it's not gendered in some kind of foundational way, that there are certain lifestyle choices that people make, whether it's leisure or work, and if you pursue those things, it's comfortable, it's safer to dress in a certain way. And all the good things in life back in history were only available to men, and therefore a dress code was designed for those people who participate in those things. And because it's only men that participate, then you began to have this clothing which appeared to be men's clothing, as opposed to we'll say related to the job function or the leisure activity, however we want to do that. And because women were excluded from those activities, they would address in a very different way. But their clothing was then given to them or designed according to their job function, their responsibility, however we would define what that is. And I don't want to do that because it ends up becoming a very toxic issue that I'm sure all of us realize. So what we're trying to say, and I think this is what Blessing, Charity, and yourself are saying, if I understand you correctly, so just say yes or no, is that clothing is not a gendered issue, it's an activity or lifestyle issue. And it just so happens that when all of these things were designed or created, the people who did all the good jobs or had all the good leisure time were men. And now that everybody can do it, what we're saying is that there's certain clothes for certain activities. And if you want to do them, that's what you should be wearing. And now everybody can wear that. Is that a fair summary of what you've just said, Curtis?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, just like today, there is like a fashion on scrubs. Scrubs are what essentially surgeons wear or used to wear in a hospital. And now it's become fashionable for doctors and some nurses to wear scrubs when they're on the ward. And it's also now become fashionable for people, just normal people. You can buy them, which is basically this medical attire that lots of people wear them. That doesn't mean everybody's a doctor. It's just that those choices, which were meant to be functional, end up becoming fashionable. And that's another thing that needs to be considered when it comes to clothing. So trousers are very practical, but now they've become a fashion item, which is why everybody wants to wear trousers, even if they're not doing the job.
It's like an apron, for instance. Like women could use aprons because that's what was required of their job. But now you have male chefs, and a man will be perfectly comfortable using an apron when they're cooking. So yeah, just tying it back to the practical natures of it, and that's where the root issues are.
Yes. Natalie.
Okay.
Oh, just
Sorry.
Natalie first, and then I don't know who then Ignatius.
I was just going to say, right now in fashion, it's fashionable to wear long skirts. So you just started this season. So
Okay.
I can go and buy some because normally you just can't find long skirts.
So Natalie can wear a skirt now
Wow.
because they're long.
No, they're fashionable now.
Yeah.
So you can see them out there getting sold. So it's easy for me to buy
Yeah.
what I
So you
wanna
can
wear.
buy, and you don't want to wear mini skirts
No.
because you don't like them.
Well, I think it's patriarchal. It's not that about freedom. I think you're buying into that patriarchal look, isn't it? How women can sometimes be abused in that sense.
So all the women here, if you wear mini skirts, it's wrong. So what you said?
In the sense, yeah, you're buying into that patriarchal, what Thingy Tate, whatever his name is, that the way he thinks women should look. So I don't.
Okay.
Not all, because I know the Conservatives want you to wear long skirts and stuff like that.
It's like you just said. You just said that. You said
Yeah.
that those conservative bad people, but I'm one of them, or I think the same way as them.
We should wear just trousers. We can wear any. So my point
No,
was,
the conservative one said only long skirts, just like you said
I don't know what you mean. Like I said,
just now. I said, why won't you wear a mini skirt? You said it's patriarchal, which means it's wrong.
okay, see what you're saying.
So that means it's wrong for all the women in this group to wear mini skirts.
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
Charity's put in the chat. It's also patriarchal to wear a long skirt. Go to Africa.
So what are you saying then, Charity? That we all have to wear that uniform again then, white shirt and trousers in the movement? Is that what should we do? What's the alternative if I can't wear a long skirt? I'm not going to wear a mini skirt. So what's the alternative? Wear white shirt and trousers?
I have no idea what Charity's saying.
Charity's saying that we shouldn't be telling people they can't wear short skirts.
Yeah.
So what's my alternative? I just wear trousers.
Just wear what you want, and Charity can wear what she wants.
Yeah, fair enough. But don't say you're not allowed to wear a mini skirt.
I think that's what she's saying.
And I think she was just, well, I don't
But
know.
it wasn't quite that, but
I think she's just saying you said it's patriarchal to wear a short skirt. She said patriarchal to wear a long skirt too. So you equally can't wear it for that reason.
Right. So what can I wear? Just trousers? You can wear what you
I think
want.
that's
We're going off
becoming
on
thing.
one now. Forget it.
Ignatius, sorry.
Okay. Okay, so my issue is almost connected to Natalie's concern. Though mine veers in the line of the issue of decency and modesty. I know when you talk about decency and modesty, it almost always am I audible? You can hear me?
Yes, yes. Carry on, sorry.
Okay.
Decency
So
and modesty.
and modesty, it almost always aligns with women. But is it also not true that with regards to issues like miniskirt, it's not very appropriate it's not appropriate for a woman to dress in that manner, or maybe something that's too tight and exposing. Yeah. Where exactly do we draw our line, in as much as we say people should have the liberty to dress the way they want? Are we not then opening a can of worms where, like they do it in the world, they say I can dress the way I want, even if it's exposing, and if it's gonna affect you as a man, it's your problem. And I don't know. I hope you understand my question.
I do, but I just want to know what your opinion is.
You want to know my opinion?
You've used the word decency, modesty, tight. So what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's important for one to consider decency and modesty as well in our dress. So in as much as we say, and unfortunately, this issue then it ends up aligning with women, and it looks like we then begin to control women when we talk about decency and modesty, because it looks like how men dress or are accustomed to dress is always decent and modest. At least in the church, in our society.
Tell me what your thoughts are, not the theory or the arguments. Don't talk in a generic sense. Tell me your personal thoughts, your personal view.
Okay, my personal view is that we should consider that issue as well to be an important factor in our dress.
You mean the women should consider it?
We should consider it as a society that we dress in a manner that is modest and decent.
Who's speaking? Someone's speaking. I can't hear this. Who?
It's Nyasha. Nyasha is saying no to me.
Okay, I thought. Okay, so Nyasha, tell us what you think. You don't agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely disagree because it has to be modest according to myself. Like what I think is modest to me, what I want to wear, what I think is modest is what I'll wear. Because if you okay, because modest, I don't think modest is something that has got what can I say?
Standard.
A standard, yeah. Because someone can say this is not modest, while another person can say this is modest. So it just depends with what I want to wear and how I see it.
Some of the dress shows form,
Yeah,
like it shapes the person.
Because you have the form. If you have the form, then it definitely show.
If you've got the form, you can show it. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's there.
If it's there, show it.
Okay, so I would want to know what others say with regards to that issue. Maybe I could be wrong. my
Okay, so to
view.
clarify, if you've got some form, Ignatius says don't show the form, and Aisha says flaunt it. Have I understood correctly?
Yeah, something like that. Like because you end up wearing maybe something that is baggy. Like for example, I'm size 14. Then if I'm not going to show my hip, for example, I would need to get a 16, of which a size 16 will be bigger on the waist.
Yeah.
So I'll end up dressing clumsy. So I don't know.
Well, that's against Ellen White as well. Ellen White says you're not allowed to wear a tent.
Yeah, so
Tight clothing.
the form will definitely come in because that's the way the clothes are. Even if you're wearing a dress, not even a trouser, a dress, if you've got the hip, it will come out.
So
Yeah.
what do we do now?
Just wear my
What do we do
size.
now? I'm not sure what you're going to do now. I guess I'd like to be in your
just wear
I'd
my
like to be in your sitting room after the meeting to see what you're going to do now.
You just wear your clothes. You just wear your size, and then I wear my clothes. I wear my size. You see?
Okay.
Okay. Brian's going to give us some words of wisdom. I know he wasn't the first one. Sorry, Brian. Tell us how to sort this out.
Yeah,
What? Yeah.
all the talk on modesty and decency and patriarchy. I think, maybe we should even consider like a middle of the road approach with all things. No extremes on both sides. Is it not good to have some bit of patriarchy when you're dealing with certain issues? Because if you want to go this way or that way and not in the middle, you're going to get caught out all the time.
So your solution is that we need to reintroduce some patriarchy back into the system to get to oil the machinery or to bring some balance.
Yeah, I think that is a better word, to bring some balance in some of the things. Because honestly, we can go on and on. I just heard Nyasha say what she said, and I agree with her. Just based on what Ignatius is saying, he's saying, okay, look, we need to consider decency and modesty. But she comes in and says, okay, that's fine. But what do you do in my case? I have a body. It's not her body that she chose, but that's what she's got.
It's a
So
beautiful
what do
body.
you do? That's why I say,
you flaunt it, the beauty of it, don't you?
in this case, yeah. Case by case for me.
So I'm not clear. If you've got a body that you're proud of, you can just show it.
It's there, whether you like it or not.
That's not middle ground.
No, what I'm saying, yeah. Ooh, it's hard to explain. It's hard to put into words, honestly. But in this case, that's why I say case by case. You can't just throw one principle at everything.
Okay, so when it comes to clothing and tightness and showing your body and modesty, you say do what you want.
Yeah, I'll go for that.
Okay. Andreas.
I was first on the Parminder.
Oh,
yeah, I think Blessing was first.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Andreas. Not personal.
No, not sure.
I knew you were first. I did it the other way around. I'd see if you complain, and you did. Failed the test.
Sorry, I don't usually complain. First time. Anyway. What I wanted to say is, I know we were speaking about this discussion within the context of society. If you allow me, I just wanted to speak about it within the context of this movement, the prophetic movement.
Sure.
Yeah, so my understanding of our reason for existence, our sole purpose, is summarized and encapsulated in Isaiah 53, I think, the repairers of the breach. I think that's what Isaiah says. I think I got the chapter correct, that we repair a breach. And Ellen White talks about that a lot, that we were raised up to repair the breach, and the breach is in the law. And I think the law is the law of equality, right? And therefore, our sole purpose is to ensure equality under the law, that the law ensures that men and women are treated the same. And another thing I wanted to say in connection with that is one of the things that external events have been showing us in the agitation of the Sunday law and in the dispensation of the Sunday law. I'm not getting into the specifics of dates or anything, but I think there's a general consensus that we are within the proximity of the Sunday law history dispensation. And one thing that external events have been showing, or external data has been showing, is the increasing polarization that's taking hold with men and women, especially young men and women. So there's this separation, or this polarization, like I said, that, it's Isaiah 58. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, Isaiah 58. So there's this polarization that's happening. And if I'm to use a prophetic symbol for that, I think there's a wall, a wall of partition that has existed between, that divides men and women. And Jesus came to basically pull down the wall of partition between Jews and Gentiles. And I think our movement is there to remove the wall of partition that separates men and women. And I think if you look at some of the commentary on what's actually causing this polarization, is focusing on one group at the expense of another. So whether it's you focus on women's issues, try and find solutions to their problems, and identifying them as victims. I'm not saying that's not legitimate, but I'm saying doing that, and then to the neglect of the problems that men experience, it's contributing to the polarization. But there's also the other side, the flip side of it, which is micromanaging one group and allowing the other group to do what they want. So it's unequal treatment in either way, and it's causing this separation. And I think what our job is, like I said, Isaiah 58, is to repair the breach in the law. The law doesn't treat people equally, fix that, and to bring down the wall of partition that separates men and women, in our case, not Jew and Gentile. And again, it's saying people should be treated equally. So when it comes back to the issue of clothing, I think if we understand what our purpose of existence is, what our reason for being is, what our identity is, we focus on the law, not on people's individual choices. Because once we say men and women should be treated equally on the issue of dress, for example, you don't micromanage men, so you can't micromanage women. And the implication of that is a woman will have to be allowed to make choices for herself without impediment from anyone. That's what I wanted to say.
So
I was saying our focus is not clothes. Our focus is the law. That's the summary of it.
what I want to say is, when you say our focus is not clothes, our focus is on the law, it's fine to say that, but everybody's interested in clothes, not in the law. And what you said was a bit more than our focus is on the law. It's saying that when it comes to clothing, we're supposed to apply the law to that subject as much as we do to any other subject. And when you do that, apply the law fairly, then you get to a place where, because we think it's inappropriate or unnecessary to critique what men wear, we're not allowed to critique what women wear. It becomes a legal issue. if I understood you correctly.
Yes, that's correct. So when I was saying our focus is on the
You've cut out.
oh, I got muted somehow.
Me.
When I was saying that the law is our focus and not clothes, I was saying we deal with the one first and apply it to the other, not the other way around. So we don't look at clothes and say, you know, let's consider modesty, let's consider each other first. That's not where we start. We start from the standpoint of the law. How does the law treat people, you know? And is it treat people equally? If it doesn't, we have to fix that because that's what we were raised to do. So that's what I meant. I wasn't saying we don't discuss the issue of clothes or that we don't care about it necessarily, but I was saying we approach it from a legal framework, like you said.
Yes. So yeah, I wasn't disagreeing with what you said. I was just trying to summarize that so that people would see it just with some like a different way of saying the same thing. So when you come up to the judgment bar, Natalie, this is for Natalie. You can leave it. It's all right, leave it. When you come to the judgment bar, can a man come up in a pair of shorts, Natalie?
Where's the judgment bar?
Not metaphorically.
I know, but like
Doesn't matter where it is.
we
It's
talking
in Birmingham.
in the world or in the movement.
Just conceptually, when you come to the judgment bar, now you're going to be judged. That's what judgment bar is. Can a man rock up in a pair of shorts? Natalie doesn't know how to answer that question.
I do, but I'm not sure.
You do know how to answer it. The answer is yes or no. The answer is yes. You just said yes, you just nodded.
No, I was saying the answer. I was agreeing to you saying the answer is yes. I know. I know that.
So what you said that you know the answer. So what's the answer?
Yeah.
Yes. So the clerk of the court comes up with their tape measure and they say, yep, 75% of leg is showing and it's okay. Then the next person comes up before the judgment bar, and does the clerk have to use the same measurement stick for the next person?
Yeah.
But the next person is a woman, and now it becomes a mini skirt.
Yeah.
I think that's what Blessing was saying. So this whole idea about what's modest or tight fitting ends up becoming legally invalid when we just start applying some, I guess, rules or method behind it. Blessing was talking about the law and he used the word micromanage, but I'm hoping everybody can see that it's actually not too difficult to come up with workable, decent, robust arguments and ways of dealing with this specific subject about clothing. Andreas, sorry, it's been a bit long.
So yeah, what I was gonna say is I'm not sure if we or if I understand now the problems. So you were saying that you know, the dynamics of voting versus the dynamics of clothing, they're the same. But we approach it differently. And I was saying that we should approach it the same way. I'm not sure with people's examples now, where do we stand with that? It seems that people are saying that we should approach it differently.
I think Blessing said that we approach it in the same way.
In the same way, okay.
If I use the word methodology, he'd say apply the same methods or the same logic to both subjects and it would work out.
Cool. Yeah, I think I agree with that. So it's just saying that we need to whatever rules we apply for clothes, we just apply it for everyone. And it's the same thing in voting. It's like it applies to everyone that we need to vote.
Yes. But we have an idea in our movement when it comes to voting. You say voting here. You don't say. Do we say my hand, my choice? I don't. I don't give my hand, or I do give my hand. We just say there's no choice. You have to go out and vote. So I think hopefully we're all okay on that. So when it comes to clothing, we have this idea to say my body, my choice. I can wear what I want. And I think what a couple of people have now said in just this study is that is not a good approach to take. And the approach to take is a much more legal one to say, how do we deal with everybody's body?
So it seemed that Blessing initially was disagreeing with me, but then he ended up agreeing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I didn't change my position, Andreas. I think you changed your position.
Go, Blessing, go. I don't want to speak on your behalf. I just said yes. You disagreed,
No,
and then
I didn't.
agree.
I didn't change my position.
Because I didn't change
what I
mine
said
either.
at the beginning is the same thing I'm saying now. So I didn't change.
And how can we agree now? Because I didn't change either.
You are the one that changed.
Oh.
No.
Okay. What we can say is that we all agree. Okay, Blessing, can you do my body, my choice? Is that what the issue is? That the kind of the catchphrase for clothing?
No.
No. Andreas, is that your mantra for clothing? My body, my choice.
No.
Okay. So, Blessing, the mantra for you for clothing is equal under the law.
Yes.
Kurt, Andreas?
Yeah, that's the same.
Yeah? Okay. So I know I haven't got everybody, but if anybody wants to comment, so the issue under clothing is everybody has to be treated in the same way. And what that means, each of us is confronted with the reality that men don't have a problem wearing t-shirts or short sleeves. And we might say we don't have a problem women wearing that, but some people do. And then when it comes to legs, it's the same issue. There's no problem in men showing 75% of the legs, but when it comes to women, it becomes an issue, and they're not being treated equally under the law. So, does anybody have a problem showing their sweat glands to others?
As in armpits?
Just as in sweat glands?
No.
What do you mean, sweat glands?
So, the only reason I ask is, I know most of us have some level of biological training, but what are nipples?
Sweat gland.
Yes, they're just glorified sweat glands. And there are plenty of societies that view them just as functional pieces of machinery, like an elbow or a shoulder. And they haven't taken on this property of being sexualized. Even though everybody knows that there are, women's sweat glands are very different to men's, yet they don't have taken on that property. But in other countries, they have become very sexualized. So Natalie's going to take away what?
Cups over your nipples, you can throw them away in your bra. No, because sometimes your bra doesn't cover your nipples. So you have to buy these things. Women can buy these things to cover your nipples.
So Natalie used to, apparently. I think it's really good that we can be, used to have these little covers, I guess, that would cover, you put over your nipples in some shape or form. So when you wear your clothes, you can't, the actual form of the nipple is hidden. And now she's saying, now you need to actually not do that. And so your nipples can be seen through your dress. And I assume you see that as liberating.
Well, it's annoying having to do that.
Yeah.
There's now bras that have nipples included, in case you don't have any. Just putting it out there.
So you've got the equal. You've got
So I'll leave that one.
padded bra as well. Hold on.
Okay, so Natalie's saying that it's liberating not to have to cover just normal parts of your body, which is just there, you know, to hide your form, which is the discussion that Ignatius and Nyasha had earlier. So maybe it's a bit more sensitive, but it's the same issue about.
Today's the first time I didn't wear them. It's weird.
Providential that Natalie didn't wear her, what they're called? This is a family program. Didn't have those covers. Tempted to turn the video around so we could all if you're interested. I really think it's good that we can talk about it openly in a light-hearted way. Emma.
Yeah.
Speak loud.
The issue with that is, I think everybody, well, not probably shouldn't say everybody. I think we know that we should be treated equally under the law, and we should approach it equally under the law as the ideal. But because we live in a dysfunctional society where things are sexualized, it's not that easy to go out there and do that. And should we be doing that when we know how other people see things and the sexualization of it? I think that's what I was saying before. That's the what's the word? The conflict, I guess.
So earlier on, Ignatius said we, and the question is we the movement or is we the world or society around us? So we'd all agree that society tempers what you can or cannot do. It applies certain pressures to get certain results. But where would we be in the movement? How should we operate in the movement? If people want to dress in a certain way, should we import all of those rules and regulations that society generally has? We're a multinational organization, an international one. We have people from almost all continents in the world, but certainly from large numbers of different nationalities with all different cultures and thoughts and ideas. What should be the standard that this movement has on issues of clothing and form, and what people can and cannot do, and what's acceptable, and how they will or will not be judged? Curtis.
Sorry, my hand was up for a previous thing.
Go ahead, it's fine.
It was going to talk about how society changes. How do you, if you have a mind that society should be changed, what's the best way to do that? And when I've thought about it, it's going back to our 3 steps over there. It's first addressing the legal aspects of an issue. So removing the barriers to doing something. So I'm going to bring up the topic of nipples again. So remove the barriers that say women can't be topless in public. And sure, not everyone will be comfortable doing that because we live in a patriarchal society. But the idea is remove that barrier first, and then over time, society will be socialized in a specific way. So first deal with the legal, and then our mindsets will follow after, not necessarily the other way around, because it can't work the other way around. Because if you try to do it the other way around, you just end up in jail.
Yes. So I haven't been told to stop yet.
No, Parminder.
I'm guessing I should do.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on the concern that Elder Emma raised, which is
what was her concern?
The concern of how to dress considering the sexist society that we live in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to reference 3 books that I went through by a British author. Her name is Laura Bates. Some people might know her. So the 3 books are Everyday Sexism, Misogynation, and Fix the System, Not the Women. And one point that she identifies, I think, in all 3 books is patriarchy has created an environment where women are blamed for their own oppression, and it's problematic. So
For their own what?
for their own oppression.
Okay.
So women end up having to be the ones to solve the problem of their own oppression. So they're blamed for it and they have to fix it. And she gives different examples. And one of the examples she gives has to do with clothing, which is this idea of, people in society will say women should dress modestly because it makes men uncomfortable and it contributes to men's bad behavior. But another thing she points out is whether the woman is fully clad, with a burqa and everything, only showing her eyes, she will still be sexually harassed. She will still be raped. She will still, go through so many problems, even after doing all those things. So it shows that the problem fundamentally is not in what the woman is wearing or not wearing. It's in the attitudes that I'll say men have, but the attitudes that exist in society or permeate society, which is this preoccupation or desire for power. It's an issue of power, as not so much an issue of whether people are indecent or not. So I think we can very quickly get into that same problem again, where women are having to fix themselves. And for the sake of society, for the sake of the world, for the sake of men. And I don't think it's a sustainable solution. I don't think it fixes the problem, is basically what I'm saying.
Could I ask you or someone else, in the movement, so this goes back to Ignatius' question, who are we talking about? In the movement, should we have a spirit of toleration? Magda, go with Magda. Magda, should we have a spirit of not a spirit of toleration? Toleration is the positive, not into. Should we have a spirit of toleration?
Yes.
So I'm gonna guess that I'll use Blessing as a sounding board. The Blessing said no, we should not have a spirit of toleration. So if I just said that, if I'm assuming he's going to say no to that, what do you think about that, Magda?
Okay, can he repeat what he said? Sorry.
He didn't say that. I'm just putting words in his mouth because he spoke a minute ago. I'm saying he's going to say we should not have a spirit of toleration, and you saying we should. So tell me if you still agree that I'm not saying change your position because Blessing said it, but why do you think we should have a spirit of toleration? Or why
Okay, can you give me example, please?
Go ahead.
Can you give me example, please?
The way you dress, I have to tolerate it. It's all about dress. Now we have to tolerate. And you say
I don't know if tolerate is.
Say that again.
I think what he said before, that we kind of like shouldn't, that women kind of like can bear what they want, that the way we don't measure men, we shouldn't measure women. So I agree with that. I don't completely know how to answer your question, though.
So repeat what you just said about what he said.
So we are under the law. We should look at the law. Men are not told what they should wear. So women shouldn't be as well. Okay, so no one should tell anybody what to wear. No, that's not right. We shouldn't say what whoever should wear, I think. Yeah, so you agree that we shouldn't tell anybody what to wear? Yes. And what do you understand toleration to be? Okay, I think the problem with that word is that in word tolerate, It's already that someone do something wrong, is it?
Carry on.
Okay. So we don't tolerate. Okay, so we don't. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but if you start going on the platform of toleration, you end up saying it's wrong to dress this way and it's right to dress this way, but now I just tolerate. And I'm going to add in parentheses your bad behavior.
Yeah, we don't tolerate. That's not right yet.
And I think in our movement, many of us live in this world or this view that we tolerate. We have to put up with the changes that are happening in the way women are dressing and looking. And I think even if we don't use the word, what the word that our thought process run down this idea of toleration. We have to tolerate stuff now, even though it's wrong, even though it's not very good, even though it's not modest, we still have to tolerate it because we can't speak anymore. We have a cancel culture in our movement. I think many people have those thought processes, both men and women. But if you apply it with proper rules, you get to a place where this idea of toleration is actually wrong at its most foundational or fundamental level. And it sounds so seductively good because you said, of course, we should tolerate, because tolerate means everybody can sort of do what they want. But what it really means is you're doing something wrong, Magda, and I will put up with it. I won't speak about it, even though I know it's wrong, even though I believe it's wrong. And that's not where we should be, and that's certainly not where we should be headed, as you've just acknowledged yourself. Because it becomes problematic if I say, you know what you're doing is not very modest, but I'll put up with it because you have a right to be immodest. And it's a dangerous place to be in. Many of us are in that realm. And if I've understood what Blessing said, maybe he will speak now because I'm speaking too much on his behalf. It's illegal to actually do that.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. A judge can't say, oh, I hate black people, but you know what? It's part of my job, so I'll have to do all the court cases, and some of them are, but I really don't like them, and they don't deserve justice. We can't live in that realm. You can't have judges who think that way. It's illegal. That's why they have to be vetted so carefully. Everybody's got their own prejudices and biases, and they sneak and hide stuff. But if you start getting judges who have inbuilt prejudices, whatever they are, you're living in a realm that is illegal by definition. That's why on most courthouses you'll see this statue of a balance in one hand, there's scales, and the person's got eye covers on. They're blindfolded because they're not allowed to see who's standing in front of them. And toleration says no blindfolds. I want to see what's going on. Natalie first, then Ignatius.
No, is that like saying the Supreme Court can't be political?
Yes, like the Supreme Court isn't supposed to be politically biased. Yes, Ignatius.
Okay, I want to bring this to the attention of everyone to see that we are victims of our culture, in the sense that well, I'll give a more practical example. That one of the things that is stalling or is hindering my father from joining this movement is the issue of dress, because in our culture, women have to dress at least in some acceptable way of dressing. So in as much as we teach truth, etc., and he agrees with most of the things that I say to him doctrinally. His question then is, but the way you used to dress was so admirable when you started. You could see that these young people are focused on heaven. They want to achieve salvation. They are so different from the world. Now you are dressing like the world and you are saying you've become better. But when we, your parents, are watching you, we see that you are actually becoming worse and worse and worse. And the nature of our discussion, the discussion that we have just had here, it makes me want to, get somebody to give me some advice to say, how then do you reach out to others who are not in a position to understand what we've just been discussing here? Are we not, was Paul wrong when when he said that when I'm with the Jews, I do like the Jews do in order to win the Jews? Is that compromise? How do we take it? How do we see it? Because in Africa, to be honest, in my village where I come from, this nature of discussion is not acceptable at all. You cannot say that a woman has to dress the way they want. Ooh, nobody will listen to you at the moment you say that. See now, so are we not supposed to apply some wisdom, perhaps, in trying, to win or to show the people around us that we do have indeed the everlasting gospel with us here, and they should give us an ear. Yeah.
I really appreciate your comments, Ignatius. I just want to direct us to this. We said in priority 1, 2, and 3. And the reality is, even though that's theoretically correct, the reality is what's the most important out of all of those? It's clothing. Right. Not just for Ignatius's father, in fact, but for most of us. The other ones don't touch us so intimately as this clothing issue, this personal space that we all live in. So I'm hoping next time that when you're rostered, Ignatius, that you might bring up this subject again, maybe bring in your own inimitable style, however you do it, because I think it's the important issue. So you mentioned from the context of the delivering of the gospel, how we would make that acceptable for people to come onto our side. And what you'll find is it's clothing. And for many of us in the movement, I don't know how many people in our group, even though we may not want to say it, and some of us have today, and some of us maybe have turned around slightly in our thinking, but clothing or personal autonomy is a really big issue. And how we approach that becomes really important, whether we just say, my body, my choice, and you already know my thoughts on that I don't think it's a very good argument at all, as opposed to approaching it from a legal perspective, as Blessing has suggested. So I'm way over time. I want to apologize. So I'm just going to stop here now and hand it over to whoever's in charge. I want to thank everybody. I know it's not that often that I spend time with you together on Sabbath. So I guess that's why you afforded me such time. Like it's 3 presentations in one. Thank you very much. And I'll just hand it over to the person who's leading out today. Oh, and I want to pray, of course. Thank you. I need some help. Dear Lord, I want to thank you that not only I, but I hope others have felt free to be able to speak openly, to express their thoughts and ideas, even if they
We're not sure whether they were correct. I hope that we have come at least to a place of, if not full understanding together, but at least we partially now are on common ground, that we can begin to view the way we live, the way we dress, eat, think, in a way that's much more systematic, in a way that we can explain and therefore understand. Be with those who have participated, be with those who have listened, and I pray that each of us go away from this study not just with more questions, but having received at least some answers, which is the blessing that we all desire. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.